This week in Post, a Q&A session answering questions from you. Hi everybody, my name is Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. This week, continuing with the Q&A session week. I'm going to answer a few of your questions about post-processing. And, well, hey, let's just dive right into it. First question's from Jacques, and he asks, in ON1 Effects, does it matter what order you apply filters in? Well, the answer is yes, but like many things in photography, yes, but it depends. And it really depends on the types of filters you're adding and what you're doing with those filter controls. So here's an example. This is a little contrived, but it will illustrate the point. You can try it with one of your images, and it's pretty simple to do. So take an image, put it into ON1 Effects. Apply a lens flare filter, one that has one of those very garish, red hot centers of flare. And then apply on top of that a color enhancer and start playing with vibrance and saturation. And what happens is the reds in that lens flare start to really get amplified, probably a lot more than what you really want for the rest of your image. Then take those same two filters and reverse the order of it, and you're going to see a different look to the photo. And the reason is, as you stack filters up, each filter operates on the sum total of what was previously applied to your image. So you do need to think somewhat about how you're going to apply filters. Rules that I do is I'll either deal with contrast or color first, and then the opposite. If I dealt with contrast first, then I'll deal with color, or vice versa, and then finish things up with more of the fine touches things. Maybe it's glow, maybe it is adding a little lens flare, vignettes, and so forth. So good question, Jacques. Thanks for sending that one in. Next question is also about ON1. It's an ON1 versus Lightroom question from Bruce. So now that ON1 has Browse, why do photographers want to continue using Lightroom? Or well, at least I can tell you why I choose to continue using Lightroom. And there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost is ON1 and ON1 Browse is not a raw processor. Yes, you can read a raw file and you'll see a rendering of it, but you're getting a default de facto from your OS. So whatever your operating system's capable of in terms of decoding a raw image, that's what you get. You don't get the level of controls that you do in Lightroom or Aperture or Capture One, where those tools have all sorts of additional logic and math in them to read those raw files and let you tune and tweak them accordingly. So that's a big reason to stick with Lightroom, Camera Raw, whatever it is that you're going to use to process that raw image if you're shooting RAW. Now, if you're shooting JPEG, you're saying, I don't care. There's a couple of other reasons that I continue to use Lightroom. Second is metadata. Lightroom is great at metadata, and that's a big part of my workflow and being able to search for photos and find things. Lots of that metadata is available in Browse, but the killer for me is that Lightroom has hierarchical keywords and Browse does not. And I fully exploit the hierarchical keywords in Lightroom to my advantage, so I can keyword quickly, I don't know, liberally, but with a minimal amount of work. So that's a second reason. And then third is just general searching and organization. I do use collections. I know that Browse has albums, and there's been a couple of things that the search criteria that I need in Lightroom that I haven't found in Browse yet. I expect that Browse will catch up in that area, but eventually, the fact is Browse is not a database. It's just scanning all your folders all the time. And I think if I were to want all of my photos in my entire catalog to be searchable in ON1, I'd have to add them all to that single favorites folder. I haven't tried this, and I'm not certain how well it would scale. Whereas if you're using a database, yeah, you have some headache with, not even headache, you have some overhead with the database, or you have to maintain your catalog file in addition to your photos. But for me, that's worth the extra effort. Hope that answers your question. Last question for today comes from Bruce, and he asks about cloning. He was doing some work on an image and he's using Photoshop Elements, And this image had vertical lines, although the image was taken at an angle, and so the lines were kind of cutting down through diagonally. And he said he had to rotate the image so that those lines were vertical, and then he was able to clone and copy paste much better in Elements. So that's interesting. The rotation part is what really caught my eye with this question. And that shouldn't matter, because the clone stamp tools, whether you're using Elements, Photoshop, perfect layers, that old suite, ON1 layers, it's just pixels. They're just copying pixels. And so even if I'm dragging on a diagonal versus dragging up and down, it shouldn't matter. But that being said, if rotating the image to get something vertical so you can do your cloning work, if that is making you get your job done faster, well, then do it. That's fantastic, and it's a great workaround to help get your clone, your copy paste work done more quickly and more accurately. So go ahead, keep rotating. So long as you're not cutting off edges of your photo, you're able to recover that later on with rotating back. Depends on the layering software that you're using. If once you've rotated and you have like corners that go out of your current crop, if they get clipped off, that might be a problem. If that's not, rotate away. So that's it for this week in Post, the Q&A session. Hope you've enjoyed it, got some answers to maybe some questions that you had. If I didn't answer your question, send me one. You can contact me through my website, and you'll get an answer to your question straight away. You don't have to wait around until I finally sit down and record a Q&A session for In Post. But, I'll send you a prompt reply in email, and if it's an intriguing question or it makes me tilt my head to the side like a puppy a little bit and think about it, I'll probably share it on the next Q&A session for In Post. Until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.